going to go to war. I want to have a chance to take my part. I'm not looking for a fight, but if there's going to be a fight, then might as well be right in the middle of it. And in 1989, the United States invaded the Republic of Panama. I showed up to the country 24 hours before the invasion began because the Ranger Regiment was going to kick this whole war off by parachuting into 2 airfields, seize those airfields, and the rest of the U.S. invasion force would fly in and land and spread out from there. I got into a couple of firefights when I was in Panama. And I had a grizzly old ranger right next to me, a guy who had combat experience because he took part in the parachute assault onto the island nation of Grenada in 1983. And he was right there with me, telling me what to expect in that first firefight. I was in an aircraft, a Black Hawk helicopter, special operations helicopter that had to make an emergency landing from gunfire. But I never really thought that I was going to die in Panama. To be honest with you, my first or second firefight was actually just pretty cool. It was a lot of adrenaline and a whole lot of fun. But a couple of my buddies, when they were in Panama, when they were parachuting in, those guys didn't even make it all the way to the ground. They were under enemy fire, and 1 or 2 of those Army Rangers were killed before they even hit the ground. And it's a reminder of just how short life is. So I got back from Panama, and it shook me up a little bit. And it caused me to think, I've been living my life like I'm going to be around for the next 100 years, but there are no guarantees. So I've got a couple of things that I've been putting off. And number 1 on that list is I need to go home and I need to ask my high school sweetheart to marry me. So I flew back home, bought a ring, and proposed. And Dawn and I set a date to get married about a year later. Now, I'm still in this special operations unit, which everything that we do is classified. And we're just about ready to get married. We've taken care of all of the details, and that's when I get notified that our unit is about to go overseas again to Kuwait as part of Operation Desert Storm. I had to convince my commander to let me go across the street to a payphone. Anybody in this room remember what a payphone looks like? So I go across the street to this payphone. It's not a secure phone line. And I call back to my fiance halfway across the country. And I say, Dawn, I can't tell you where I'm going. And they won't authorize me to tell you when I'm leaving. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be in the country on our wedding day. Long pause on the phone. She said, Jeff, if you're going off to war again, we need to get married right away. We need to get married before you leave. And I was like, well, first of all, hang on. This is not a secure phone line. And secondly, I never actually used the word war. I'm just saying, probably not going to be in the country on our wedding day. And this is a true story. Let me tell you how patriotic my wife is. She said, don't play games with me, Jeff. If you get shot, I want the flag. We need to get married before you go. So I had to run back across the street, talk to my commander, run back to the payphone, and say, yes, ma'am, I'll get on the plane right away. Flew home, got married, and then went off to Kuwait. I got into a firefight in Kuwait too. All of this is to explain to you, by the time that I go to Somalia and take part in Black Hawk Down, I'm 24 years old, but I have more combat experience than most people that have been in the Army for 20 years at this point. And I've been around the block. I've seen the body bags, I've seen the blood and the bullet holes before we get to Somalia, but I've never seen killing on a scale like I saw in Somalia, never before, and never since. And I was a squad leader. I had about 10 men that I was responsible for. My job in Somalia was to take the vehicles in and out of the city streets on all of the missions that we did. Now, this very small, highly surgical special operations force went over to Somalia in 1993 on a killer capture mission. I should explain to you that there's a drought right now in Africa. And there are many people that are struggling to eat because of the famine. In the 1990s, early 1990s, there was this drought of almost biblical proportion. And that drought caused a famine, and by late 1992, there were already several 100,000 people dead in Africa because of starvation. If you're old enough, you may remember this worldwide concert called Live Aid, which was trying to raise money for the starving children in Africa. And the epicenter of the drought was in this country right on the Horn of Africa called Somalia, and the capital city of Somalia, Mogadishu. It's a city that basically had no functional government, no military, no police force, no brave men and women like we honored in this room tonight. And in December of 1992, let me tell you the kind of country that you live in. In December of 1992, the United States Marines landed on the beaches of Somalia, and the only reason that the United States was there, part of this United Nations effort, we're not there for your oil, we don't want your land, we're just there to try to help you with this human rights crisis. We're literally there to give you a bag of beans and a bag of rice, and hopefully you'll be able to survive for one more day. The U.S. was there for months. And the situation in Mogadishu, the capital city, continued to deteriorate. Now it's the spring, early summer of 1993, and this capital city is descending into chaos. There's a couple of warlords in Mogadishu. Think about them like gang leaders. They use guns and they use drugs. Literally a local drug. They hand out drugs, they hand out guns. Would you come fight me, and would you kill the other warlord across the street so that I can become the most powerful man in the country? So a couple of these warlords started to fight each other. And one of these warlords, by the name of Muhammad Farah Aidid, he led the Hopper-Getter clan, and Aidid made the decision to start to target United Nations workers. So he started to hit supply convoys. He started to attack U.S. food distribution sites, and in the summer of 1993, Aidid and his clan murdered 24 United Nations workers. And I was off training for something else, somewhere else in the world, in Texas, when we got a call, stop what you're doing, come to the East Coast, we're gonna throw this very small, very surgical package together, because last night the United Nations Security Council met. And the most powerful leaders in the world said, we gotta do something about this warlord Aidid. We can't let this kind of atrocity stand. So they threw this really small package. It was a company of Army Rangers from here in Georgia, a helicopter unit from Kentucky, and some special operators from up and down the East Coast of the U.S. And we all went together over there to go find Aidid and the top-ranking leaders from his clan, and we're going to capture them if possible, send them back to the United Nations, but if not, we'll just kill them and take them out of the country. So we conduct a total of 7 missions while we're in Somalia. We thought this would take maybe 6 weeks. We're 12 weeks into it. And we've taken down a lot of big fish in the pond, but we still haven't got the number 1 guy. We still don't have Aidid, and there's a couple more high-ranking people from his clan that we're trying to find. And we are getting a lot of pressure at this point from President Clinton's administration to wrap this mission up and to get out of Somalia, because the news is starting to call Somalia another Vietnam. So my boss, 2-star general by the name of William Garrison, the JSOC commander, we get a tip on Sunday afternoon, October 3rd, that 2 really high-profile Aidid lieutenants are meeting in the same building at the same time. And we've never seen 2 high-profile guys in the same place since we got in the country. But this is in the middle of the part of town that's controlled by Aidid. It's nothing but bad guys all across the street and around the block. And this is broad daylight. And at this point, Special Operations Forces have such a huge advantage at night with our night vision capabilities that I've only done 1 or 2 daylight missions, and an entire career of more than 23 years in the Army. And this is broad daylight. This is as dangerous as you can possibly get. Now, I've been in the country for several months, and we've done 7 missions. And between missions, what happens is guys train, guys will spend time preparing for the next combat operation. We were on a 30-minute notice. In 30 minutes time, we could be loading vehicles and aircraft and hitting a target anywhere in the city. But for the most part, it was days, in some cases weeks, of just absolute boredom. And more than a few times, I was sitting around talking to one of my machine gunners, a guy by the name of Dominic Pilla. Pilla and I talked about everything. We talked about guns, we talked about girls, we talked about life. And I covered the whole gambit with Pilla, but I never talked to him about my faith. Well, I had 50 opportunities to tell Pilla what I believed, but I just never took the chance. We got on a vehicle, and we got notified that it was about time to go out and launch this mission. And I always assumed, and I wish I knew better, I always assumed if something happens to one of my men, I'll have a chance to sit there, look them in the eyes before they slip off into eternity. I'll have the chance to be the last face they see and the last voice they hear, and I will have an opportunity to talk to them about Jesus. And we load up on these Humvees. At the same time that the special operators are going in on Black Hawks and Little Birds, and they're taking down the target building, and I arrive at the Humvees about the time that the building starts to get taken down, and we're under gunfire right away. In fact, as soon as I get there, I'm already notified that one of the Rangers that went in on the helicopters missed the rope, and he fell about 70 feet, and he landed in the city streets head first. So my battalion commander is already ordering me. I haven't even been on the target for 5 minutes when Lieutenant Colonel Danny McKnight orders me to go get to this wounded Ranger by the name of Todd Blackburn, put him on a stretcher, put him on my Humvees, and drive him back to our surgeon. I have to fight my way up to Blackburn, and I load him on a vehicle. He's totally unconscious. He's got no protection around him and a couple of medics trying to keep him alive. And I split my squad in half. I put half of my squad on a Humvee in front of Blackburn and the other half on a vehicle behind him. And we're going to provide some guns and some protection to get him out of the city and back to our base. Now, as I said, we're under gunfire, but I've been in firefights before. This gunfire is far enough over my head. I'm not as worried about the enemy fire at this point as I was about roadside bombs and about the serious head and neck injuries that Blackburn sustained. So I told my boss, I'm going to drop him off at the base. I'll come right back out here. I'll be back here in less than 30 minutes. I'll move as fast as I can. And as I was driving down the road, it's nothing but potholes. It's nothing but debris. We're moving at about 10 or 15 miles an hour on these Humvees. I drive next to the target building on a narrow alleyway, and then I made a right turn onto Hallway-Dig Road. Now this scene is portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down. But the movie deliberately downplayed the violence of this scene, because the directors were worried if we showed the audience what really happened, this movie would receive a rating of X for violence. And if it's rated X for violence, nobody will pay money to go see it. So we've got to tone down what really happened on Jeff's Humvees. Because we turned that corner on a narrow road, less than 20 or less than 50 feet wide, and those 3 Humvees got hit from 100 different angles at once. I'm talking rooftops with hand grenades and rocket-propelled grenades from alleyways coming across both sides of the street. Every window, every doorway, everywhere we looked, there's rapid gunfire, and most of it is from me to that speaker right there, less than 10 feet away. And I had a guy on the top of my Humvee on a 50 caliber machine gun who was holding the trigger down and spraying bullets all over. And by being that wild with the machine gun, there's no way he was going to hit anybody. So I told him to take the weapon, face the left side of the Humvee, pick up all of the enemy fighters. Dominic Pilla was sitting right behind me in the Humvee. He had a Mag 58 machine gun. To this day, he is the greatest machine gunner I've ever seen in my life. And so I told Pilla to take his machine gun, face the right side of the Humvee, and pick up all the enemy fighters on the right. I'm sitting in the front seat, so I'll take care of the front of the Humvee. Another guy in the back next to Pilla will take care of the rear, and the warriors in this room already know what's going on. Now we're just trying to keep each other alive long enough to make it back to the base. What we couldn't see is down the road on the right side, hiding in the bushes, waiting for us, was a Somali gunman. And when we got next to him, he saw Pilla at the same time that Pilla saw him. And these two guys turned the weapons towards each other, and they shot and killed each other. But Pilla was hit in the forehead, just above his eye. He took a heavy weapon round right in the forehead, and he lost most of his head and fell over into the lap of Specialist Tim Moynihan. And Dominic Pilla was dead before his body hit the floorboard. In fact, Moynihan began to lose control in the Humvee behind me. Everybody around me was totally terrified. It was turning into chaos, and Moynihan is screaming, "Sergeant Struecker, Pilla's been hit, he's been killed." And when I looked behind me, it was like the whole back of that Humvee just got painted red with his blood. It's the moment that I started to realize every one of us are going to die. The math is going to make it impossible for any of us to get out of these city streets alive. And through a series of events, I don't have time to talk to you about all of them, we finally made our way back to the base. When we got back there, it was already chaos. The surgeon was running to the Humvee behind me to go get Todd Blackburn and to pull him off of the back of his vehicle, trying to keep him alive. And the medics came up to my Humvee, and they were trying to see if they could resuscitate Pilla, and I told them, "Don't bother, he's dead." He was dead as soon as his body hit the floorboard. There's no hope for him. And they just pulled him off of the back of the Humvee, and they laid him on a stretcher and started to take him over to our mortuary affairs. I always believed that I would have a moment to sit there and talk to Dominic about Jesus. I was absolutely convinced that even if he took a round in the chest, I would have enough time to look him in the eyes and explain to him about eternity. And because he took this head wound, because he was killed instantly, I never had a chance to take that moment and talk to him. I could have had 50 opportunities that I just never took. And to this day, one of my greatest regrets, if God would give me one moment in time, I would go back to before this mission. And I would look Dominic Pilla in the eyes. And I would tell him about Jesus, because there really is an eternity waiting after you and I die. And that eternity lasts forever. And I don't know where Pilla is today, but I know I had 50 opportunities to talk to him about Jesus. As soon as I got back to the airfield that day, I started to pray. God, if it's my life tonight, I will willingly give it. But please don't let another one of my men die tonight without me having the chance to talk to them, to look them in the eyes and explain to them about Jesus Christ and who he is and what he can do for them. Guys, I got called back into action almost immediately after getting back to the base. My platoon leader walked up to me and he said, "Jeff, we just had a second Black Hawk go down. I didn't even know the first one got shot down." He said, "We've already put the search and rescue force in at the first crash site, and now we don't have anybody left. So Jeff, I need you to get your men back on the Humvees. I need you to go out to the second crash site and see if anyone is alive where Mike Durant's helicopter went down." As I was making my way out to the Durant crash site, I came through another ambush and got hit with enemy fire from 5 feet away. Made my way back to the base, took a whole bunch of our Rangers and special operators that are shot to pieces back, dropped them off. I'm getting ready to turn around when our big boss stops us and says, this is crazy. We can't keep sending these Humvees out there. Because this is long before we created armored Humvees. This is just fiberglass and tin. And he said, we need help. So he called for the United Nations, and the Pakistanis showed up at our base. The Malaysians came with their armored personnel carriers, and the Pakistanis showed up with tanks, and at about 11 o'clock that night, we all loaded on those vehicles and drove back out into city streets. My men and I stayed on those same 2 Humvees until 9 o'clock the next morning. Vehicles shot to pieces, 3 of the 4 tires shot flat underneath me, which is pretty impressive when you realize that those vehicles are equipped with run flat, and it takes a lot of bullets to make 1 flat tire. And when I got back in the next day, my buddies were waiting for me. It's a moment that God threw me a curveball that I never saw coming. You see, my buddies were walking up to me. I didn't even get all the way off the Humvee before they were grabbing me, hugging me, and saying, Jeff, I need to talk to you right now. Because I watched you in those city streets last night, Jeff. And there's something different about you. I listened to your voice over the radio, and everybody was terrified. Everybody was freaking out. But you sounded like you were completely calm. And Jeff, you and I have the same training. You and I have been through the same things. But I watched you, and I'm telling you, you have something that I don't have. And I don't even know what it is, but I know I want it. So how can I have what you've got, Jeff? I started telling my friends right there about Jesus Christ and who he is and what he's done for me, because they're saying, I saw something supernatural on that battlefield. And I want that kind of faith.